Good morning to you one and all. Welcome to the very first of our series of Friday lunchtime webinars. We're expecting a big house today, so we've opened up a couple of minutes early. Just bear with us as we are expecting 100 plus today. One thing I would ask as you come in, if you would go to slido.com, maybe on your smartphone, and the code for today is LM140122, which is today's date. And there is a poll. So please get underway. You can see the code there, hashtag LM140122. Perhaps you'd go in there and just start answering the questions, 5 questions, just to give Richard, our guest speaker, a flavour of your thoughts on the discussion points today. So you're all very welcome. Hope you had a good Christmas and New Year period. I don't know about you, but for me, it seems a long time ago already, even 2 weeks into the new year. But we're pleased to see you all. So as I say, we are expecting over 3 figures today. So just bear with us if you would. We'll just give folks a bit more time to tune in. But for those just come in, welcome. Please do go on to slido.com and start filling in our initial survey. Hashtag LM140122 is the code. And we will be very interested to see and hear your responses to that. So it's just 12 o'clock. We'll give it another 60 seconds. We'll just let it roll over by a minute before we make a start, if you don't mind. Thank you. Yes, we've got folks coming in all the time. Well, it is a minute past, so I think we will make a start. We can accept others as they come in. So officially now, a very good afternoon as it is now. It's just tripped past midday, so a very good afternoon to you. For those that don't know me, my name is Andrew Carpenter. I am Chief Executive of the Structural Timber Association. I'm also Chief Executive of Constructing Excellence in the Southwest and the Midlands. And we're now almost 2 years into this program of bringing you Friday lunchtime webinars, which we're delighted to see has had such a positive impact on people's working lives and how valuable you're finding it. So we thank you for that. We are now joined by the Constructing Excellence family of regions, as you can see on this slide, together with the CIOB, in bringing these Friday lunchtime sessions to you. So we're all pleased to be welcoming you today. Particularly pleased today to welcome Richard Smith from the NHBC as our first guest speaker for 2022. And he's going to be giving you, as you can see, a technical update from an NHBC perspective with particular regard to modern methods of construction, which of course is the direction of travel in which we're all traveling at the moment. I've been talking about the survey, which we've got on slido.com. If I could ask you all, please, to go to that, slido.com, enter today's code, hashtag LM140122. That will give us a good flavor of your thoughts on NHBC stroke MMC today. Hope you all had a good Christmas and New Year. I was saying earlier to those that were in, seems like a long time ago for me already. We're well into the new year. I think we're all up and running with busy programs, which is very exciting. And certainly from a webinar point of view, we've got a lot of really good topics to cover in the coming weeks. In fact, we've got speakers booked now well up into mid-May, so that's really exciting. I think what we'll do, Richard, without further ado, I'm going to put myself on mute, turn my camera off. Richard, we'll have your presentation, and then following that, we'll go into the results of the survey, and then we'll go into a Q&A. So, folks, if you've got questions for Richard as we go through the presentation, hold on to them. Go into that slido.com with the code, and you'll see there's an ability there to ask questions. If you could post the questions in Slido, it makes it so much easier because Abraham can then bring the questions up on the screen. So as Richard goes through the presentation, please do think about your questions, post them in Slido, and we'll deal with them later. But for the time being, Richard, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really interested to hear what you have to say, as I'm sure our audience is as well. So over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks. First of all, I've got a poll of different questions before we start on the presentation. So do you want to share the questions, Andrew?
Yep, let's do that. Sorry, I'd that's what I'd ask people to start for. So let's do them on the screen then. Thanks, Abraham. Sorry about that, Richard.
That's all right, no problem.
So question one. Let's go question one. Are you going to take us through this, Richard?
Yeah, I can do.
Yeah,
so
okay. I'll mute.
So this is during Q3 of 2021. How many new plots were registered with NHBC during that time? Either 26,000, 30,000 or 34,000. Okay, thank you. I'll give the answers later, but thank you very much. Okay, number of registered plots using MMC and volumetric and panelized construction has increased during lockdown. What is that maximum percentage increase during that time? And again, I'll give you an indication of that shortly. Next one. Yeah, a recent survey completed by NHBC highlighted that a number of developers will switch to heat pump installations as part of the 2021-22 Part L change ahead of the Future Home Standard. What percentage of the survey stated that they would do this? Okay. Okay. Yeah, what is the most significant risk to NHBC with respect to MMC? Systemic defects built into multiple homes, unable to inspect on site due to factory production, on-site storage and weather protection during construction. Okay. Yeah. So how many electric vehicle charging points? And just to clarify, this was at the time when we wrote the publication on electric vehicle charging points. Okay, we're still moving around a bit. Okay, so I'll go through some of those points as part of the presentation. I'm now going to share my screen. Okay, I'm just checking, Andrew, we can see that as a presentation, yeah?
All good. Thank you, Richard.
Excellent.
All good.
Just checking. Okay, well, first of all, thank you for having me. I will say that I am working from home, hence why I'm casually dressed and whatever. And I do have a couple of dogs downstairs, so if Amazon turn up, we might hear a bit of barking, but there's not much I can do about that today, I'm afraid. But it's nice. I can say nice to virtually meet you all, and it's good to be here. So I'm going to give you an update from an NHBC technical perspective, and the three areas I want to cover is NHBC accepts, or how we deal with modern methods of construction. I would like to then talk about what we're doing for NHBC standards, but not only for 2022, but what we consider we need to do long term and put in place. And finally, I'd like to talk to you about the work we do with NHBC Foundation from a research perspective and how we support the industry with that. So the first question is about NHBC volumes. Well, yes, it was just under 34,000 units in Q3 last year. We are seeing quite high volumes of registrations at the moment. We did have a dip in completions during mid-lockdown, but everything's quite busy and everything's bouncing back quite strongly. And house building is very strong at the moment. So that's the first answer to the questions. I'll now go through the presentation, perhaps give you some updates and give some answers to some of the questions as we go along. So the first part is NHBC accepts, and the reason why NHBC set up NHBC accepts is because the traditional method of a warranty provider such as NHBC accepting an MMC would be via the builder. So the builder would submit a warranty application to NHBC, and we'd see something weird and wonderful, and we didn't know whether we would or wouldn't accept it. And the difficulty there is for manufacturers. There's no certainty from a manufacturer's perspective whether NHBC would or wouldn't, and there wasn't a method in place for that. So we decided to set up NHBC Accepts to create some assurity for manufacturers that manufacturers can meet NHBC standards. And by doing that, give builders and developers confidence that innovative products such as closed panel and volumetric systems can meet NHBC requirements. We do have a rigorous process. We are not ashamed to say that. And the main reason for that is because we want to ensure that MMC is of good quality and is durable for a full term of at least 60 years, if not more. And so we feel quite strongly about that. And what we don't want to do is accept a lesser standard that may have then a negative impact on the MMC industry. But the interesting thing for me is the number of plots that were registered during the over sort of the last 2 years since we've launched NHBC Accept. So we were running at around 1% for closed panel and volumetric systems, which is relatively low, really. It's quite low on the scale of things. But since lockdown, we've almost hit 6%, which has seen a 5% increase. It sort of dipped down a little bit, but it is picking back up again. And there seems to be a lot of interest around modern methods of construction of different types. Now, I think we all have a different opinion about what MMC is. I am predominantly talking today about closed panel and volumetric systems. And I would say that actually the technology around what has been built, as in whether it's a timber-based or a light gauge steel-based or a concrete-based system, is not necessarily new technology, but it's the method of building which is the new technology. As in, houses are built in factories and delivered to site, whether that's in a panel form or or closed panel form or in a volumetric system. That is the key change, and it's about delivering those volumes. The one thing that is particularly important with with factory produced dwellings is ensuring that there's those factory production controls in place to ensure there's a consistent product from one module or one panel to another. And that is something that at NHBC we focus quite heavily on. So not only do we inspect on site when the units go on site, we also have a system where we do inspect it within the factory, and we also look and assess the factory production controls that are in place with the manufacturer. And once we are satisfied that the quality controls are in place, we do require the manufacturer or the supplier of the building system to produce a system manual, and we measure then the performance of the quality of the modules or panels against that system manual to make sure there's consistency of product. So not only do we carry out physical inspections on site, but we carry physical inspections within the factory, and we measure against that factory production control, and we measure against the system manual that the manufacturer has provided to say how they build. So just to give some examples there, checking consistency of materials, checking that products that you cannot see or parts of the building that you cannot see on site are incorporated within the system or the module. And that's the most important part to establish with volumetric and closed panel systems, is that you are less able to physically inspect on site because it is closed in generally within the factory. So we will talk about risks particular to off-site construction. The key one for me, and I think that it's the one that we're all trying to avoid, is that systemic risk of failure. Okay, so what we don't want to do is incorporate a bad practice into a volumetric build that is then wide scale across a number of dwellings within the UK. So that's the key thing. A systemic risk is risky to NHBC, but it's also prone to substantial reputational damage to the modern method of construction industry, or the innovative or the off-site industry. So that to me is the most important aspect that we need to consider. So the other thing we need to look at is the use of new materials, or the combination of new materials. Now, my experience is that generally speaking, apart from the odd exception, the use of materials, or the materials that are used, are not that innovative. How they are put together within a factory can be. And I think that's the slight difference, how they work within a factory, how they work in the format that they are put together. So it could be, for example, that the inner part of the construction is a type of construction that we have accepted, or the inner leaf that we've accepted before. We do require cavities, but we might find then that the external finishes may be different to what we've seen before, compatible with the inner leaf. That's just one example. Or the use of different roofing materials, or whatever, or the use of different flooring materials, particularly when you've got volumes and volumetric and modular buildings. So it's more about the format of how these materials sort of work together with each other in a volumetric or a closed panel environment. This again to me is a significant risk, and that is how a factory produced module or closed panel then interacts with the actual construction on site. It's knowing where one stops and the other one starts. And it's also knowing that the site is fully understanding of how that off-site construction works in relation to what is built on site, and to ensure that if, for example, fire socks or cavity barriers aren't included as part of the factory production controls or the factory installation, what is the method to ensure that that is in place on site to ensure that they're there and correct? That is one example. We sometimes find that sometimes MMC goes to site and we have teething problems because local trades, such as bricklayers, for example, are not familiar with this kind of system. But what we are seeing now is a number of the manufacturers of the systems are taking more ownership and responsibility of the construction on site. But not only that, but also are in some cases becoming developers themselves, which is a positive step forward. Lack of clarity and ownership of design, overall design, and again in relation to innovative and off-site construction, the design needs to be locked down early, and it needs to be clear who owns that design. So if you're a volume house builder or a key house builder and you're receiving modules from a modular manufacturer, it's important that that design responsibility, someone is accountable and someone owns it, to ensure that interface between, again, the off-site and the on-site. So substitution of materials and amended design. So yeah, to me, the key strength of off-site construction is to build higher volumes in a more consistent manner in a dry environment. But what tends to happen, and especially has happened more recently due to material shortages, is that we have seen some material substitutions. And we would then go back to the off-site manufacturer to ask the questions why that is, and reevaluate and maybe amend the system manual to incorporate those. But sometimes it's down to the fact that the manufacturers of MMC have a design, but to actually meet the needs of a specific client, they may need to amend that design. So it's something we have to be quite careful and keep an eye on. And it's something that we've raised with a number of different manufacturers recently, where we've gone back and asked some questions, and to be fair, they've responded quite positively. Next part is inadequate and complete design. I think there's more in-depth design required for volumetric or off-site construction, and that is to ensure the correct implementation on site, and that is because of the lack of familiarity on site as well. So it's really important that the design is detailed and more detailed than perhaps it would be within with a site environment. Because with a traditional build, we know that we can core drill a hole in the wall or place an extract fan, but it's more place an extract fan in a certain position or whatever, based on what you've seen on site. But I think there's more of a risk where you're assuming that could be the same scenario with volumetric and panelized. So that's why really designs need to sort of show positions of extract outlets and things like that, and make sure they're properly designed in, so that they're completed properly, so there's no risk. And the other one is that to ensure that manufacture is good, and I think that the one thing we want to emphasise as part of today, and like anything, that there are good MMC and there's not so good MMC, and it's important that we ensure that we work proactively with the good ones, but we don't provide warranties on those that don't meet our standards, especially in relation to quality of manufacture and production controls. And then we're looking at storage, transport and erection. This is the most important part as well, that what we don't want to see is a module or a panel system produced in a factory, kept bone dry, and then kept outside for 6 months, or kept on a muddy site for 6 months before it's erected. So the storage and transportation logistical part and the erection is a critical part of the element to that. And then again, inspection regimes are different, and that has its own challenge, because with an inspection regime, the risks are different, so the different areas of inspection are different, and that's why we do a number of these inspections within the factory. But then our risk management inspection on site would focus more on the connections between the modules or the panels and the protection to those buildings against weather. So we'll just talk about the process. So we have an initial inquiry. We normally do an initial review, because what we don't want to do is we don't just want to take money off manufacturers who will never meet our standards. So what we tend to do is we tend to do an initial review. We provide a scope to say whether we think there's a likelihood that we could provide warranty on there, put a fee proposals together, and then we will then have a project meeting with one of our specialists, with the manufacturer, and talk through the assessment process. And then we start gathering the information. We then review that technical information. We provide a review, we give the feedback, and there's probably a bit of to and fro in then with information. And that stage then we produce the system manual, or the manufacturer produces the system manual, we do together. And then from there then, our construction quality team will do factory visits to check that the system is actually been built in accordance with the system manual, and the manufacturer is capable of building to that system manual. And then from there, then we will issue an NHBC accept certificate. Now, I need to clarify here that what that NHBC accept certificate states is that the system is suitable for warranty. It's not saying that we'll issue a warranty certificate on every building, because it still needs to be built, and we carry out then our risk management processes. But it gives the manufacturer an assurity that they can achieve an NHBC acceptance, subject to meeting our standards on an ongoing basis. So what we then do is we review the system each year, and review the system manual and give feedback. So it's an ongoing rolling process, and that's how we've got the governance in that. So the ones we really look at volumetric systems. So volumetric systems are, in its most simple form, is a box, and it can be completed to various levels of completion. It could have cladding systems included on it. It could have its carpets fitted. It could have curtains. It can have kitchens, or it could be more basic than that. Windows could be fitted. Windows may not be fitted. But that's the one thing we look at is a volumetric system, and that's effectively a number of boxes that would stack on top of each other. And we see a few of those. And then the other aspect is panelized systems. Now, actually, timber frame is a panelized system. That's an open panel system, and what that means is with timber frame is that we can physically inspect all the different elements of that on site. It's when it becomes closed panel and we can't actually physically inspect all those elements, that we then ask that we have an NHBC acceptance or some form of third-party certification. And so that's a panelised system, and we're seeing quite a wide use of panelised, and some developers have been quite innovative to use panelised systems to overcome regional or local site shortages in personnel, especially in various trades. So that way then they can maintain quality during the build. And then we look at innovative products. Now this is something that is a bit of a surprise to us, really. Is we thought that NHBC accepts would focus predominantly on volumetric and panelised, but we have a lot of manufacturers coming through to us with interesting products that say that they require an NHBC acceptance to satisfy their customers, i.e. builders and developers, that NHBC will accept various products. And that ranges from composite lintels to non-combustible cavity trays to parapets to brick slips or roofing membranes or whatever. We've even got one acceptance on topsoil, so you can see the variation on that. And to put a bit of a mix on that, to see what we have, you'll see that volumetrics, we've got just up to 15 products, but you can see that panelised and innovative products are where our most inquiries are and where our numbers are. We do have some site-based products, but there's not many of those, and we do have a number of foundation systems that are innovative, so especially from innovative piling manufacturers, etc. So just some key things to consider. Okay, just because it's built off-site, it doesn't mean to say that it's always the best solution. Okay, it's important that there is a quality element to the off-site construction. It should have auditing process and effective factory production controls, and that's quite important because there are a number and a range of innovative manufacturers, but it's important that there is that quality. So we have to spend more time with smaller manufacturers or smaller developers that may be building something of a decent quality but may not have the infrastructure in place. And that research and development aspect requires a significant amount of time. So predominantly we're working with some of the larger builders and suppliers of NMC, but there are those that are quite small. I've been working recently with a relatively small regional developer who's developed their own NMC. It's a good system, but we've had to look at the factory production controls in a slightly different way to review that. We have to constantly review the quality of the product and make sure that we feed back any sort of issues back to the manufacturer to ensure that anything that we're picking up on site that we're seeing as an issue that we can feed back and incorporate into the system manual and ensure that is sort of designed out long term. And that's quite a long process, and it's normally, again, change of design and materials, which is quite common at the moment. So, and then basically, early design freeze. And I mentioned that before on design, is making sure that we freeze the design in a way that is done early enough, which is sometimes a bit of a challenge because we don't necessarily freeze designs on traditional builds because of the way that traditional builds are built. And this is a comment that we've got, that those cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And we should aim to design and build volumetric and closed panel and any innovative construction with focusing on construction quality and long-term durability. So I'm now going to talk about NHBC Standards 2022. I'll be quite honest with you that this year we've done a relatively light touch to our standards with some minor changes to sections and not any deep dives to the various sections. And I'll explain why that is shortly. But what we want to do is we want to change the way that we look at our standards and how we develop our standards. We want to revamp how the style of our standards look. We want to ensure that our standards are relating to those that use it most, and predominantly that is realistically operatives on site and our inspection team and designers. So we're looking at focusing our standards to be more image based and work on there. And we want to develop our 3D app a lot more so we can work on that. We want to add more key construction details, and we're looking at considering whether we can add photos into our standards to show what good looks like and what bad looks like. And we think that's a good message. And finally, we want to look at the layout to make sure that it's a layout that's consistent across the standard and is good with language. We have to recognise that, especially on sites, there are multiple languages that are used, and we want to work with that. So we're quite we've got a quite ambitious target to go forward in that respect. The other aspect that we've got is that our standards do need to go through a fundamental change to help support tackling climate change, but also to support the industry in achieving its requirements with future home standards, and recognise with that although the NHBC are supportive of the future home standards, we have to ensure that our standards are in place to ensure that any risk with the future home standards is mitigated. We also want to make sure that what we are not doing going forward is creating standards that would have a negative impact on the environment or negative impact on climate change. So, for example, minimum temperature delivery of hot water within kitchens, we will likely to amend our standards to go with industry best practice rather than something over and above going forward. So that's one example. We also recognise that there's some work to be done on our sections on microgeneration, and there's also sections that we need to work on, such as ventilation and how we deal with things such as overheating and how we gather that information and go from there. The one challenge that we have at the moment, and this is more from a building regulatory point of view, is the way that the transitional arrangements have been written for 2022. So as it currently stands, or previously, the transitional arrangement would actually be on a site-by-site basis. But for 2022, this is on a plot-by-plot basis or building-by-building basis. And what that means is that if your building regulations application is served before 15th of June 2022, you have 12 months to commence that building. So if your building regulation application has 5 buildings, for example, all 5 buildings need to commence. If one commences, that will stay with the current standards, but the other 4 will have to go to the new 2022 standards, which is a bit of a challenge for builders and developers, because it's understanding how we manage that risk. It's understanding how they factor in various designs, because some of these sites have been around for some time. They could be quite large phase sites. And then also with the way that the transitional arrangements have been written, it's for the excavation of a foundation, not necessarily for concreting of a foundation or the laying of drains. And as a warranty provider, we need to think about, if we accept the excavation of a foundation, what is the risk to us if that excavation is not concreted? So we're just doing some work at the moment about how we incorporate those transitional arrangements to make sure that we capture all those different buildings, but also to ensure that if it is a commencement of drainage, that we don't actually, by trying to get ahead of the transition, the drainage, it does not suffer for it, if you like, and the same with different foundation systems. So we're looking at the future home standards, and what we thought is how do we actually plan for this as part of our standards? What do we need to do, and what do we need to change now, and what do we need to change going forward? So what we did is we sent out a survey to be fair to our major builder customers, to ask them about how they were going to meet their, if you like, meet the requirements of the future home standards, and whether they were going to go ahead of the curve or whether they were going to go along the curve or whatever. And that would give us then a bit of a plan about how we deliver standards. And I want to share with you some of the survey information. So just to give you a bit of indication there, we've got current 2021, which is 21-22, 25, which is the future home standard, and then when we go to net zero carbon in 2030. And what we're seeing is that we will see a reduction of cavity masonry construction as we head towards 2030, and we'll steadily see an increase in timber frame as we head towards 2030. And likewise, we'll see an increase of MMC, whether that be volumetric or panelised, as we head towards 2030. But what it does do, it gives us a good indication of when that will take place. And the key thing is there's a key step change as we head towards 2030. So building fabric, the different aspects of what we're going, what is proposed. It's likely that we at the moment we see some developers that are building with wider cavities at the moment, say 150 cavities. We are seeing that for 2022, more developers will be building with at least a 150mm cavity, which has its own challenges. We need to understand how, from a masonry structural point of view, how that works, for example. But you'll see that those walls will increase more and more or more developers will use wider cavities as we go towards 2030. We'll also see that air leakage will pretty much stay the same as it is for now, but as we go towards 2025 and 2030, we'll be going to more of a passive style of standard when it comes to air leakage. And you'll see that less than 5 will start to significantly increase from 2025. I'll come on to this in a moment, but increased ground floor insulation poses some problems for other areas, ground gas, for example. So we're doing some work on that. Increased loft insulation, we're not seeing much of that because it's already it's an easy win at the moment, but again, towards 2030, we'll see more of that. Ground floor cassettes, we'll see a few more of those coming through. And also we'll see perhaps a push towards triple glazing as we go towards 2030. And ventilation, again, we've got the air leakage rates there on the left-hand side, but you'll see that we will see more complex ventilation systems as we head towards 2025 and 2030 with decentralized systems. Been the preferred method of choice for 2025, and then more with mechanical whole house ventilation with heat recovery at around 2030. Heating up water. Now, this is one of the questions. A bit of a surprise for me. I was expecting to see more builders and developers to go down the route of adding heat or including heat pumps in developments from this year. But the main concern for developers at the moment is that from a running cost perspective, they feel that for 2022 to 2025, the home may be of a lesser standard from a running cost point of view. And I think that actually the thought process is actually that at 2025, when dwellings need to be electrified, that the fabric performance will align more closely with that electrified dwelling with heat pump installation, which is quite interesting for me. We'll see some increase in district heating systems. I think where that came about is more in blocks, okay, more tower blocks and that kind of scenario. So we'll see more of that as we go towards 2025. And obviously we'll see no gas boilers from 2025 onwards. I'll be a bit concerned if I said that. And you'll also see that that heat pumps will be generating hot water as we go forward. I've got a separate slide on that. And then low and zero carbon, again, car charging points. Now, bear in mind, this was completed, the survey was completed before the release of Part S, which is bringing it in early, it's gone ahead. But again, it was from the 2025 onwards, but obviously that's coming forward now. There's a lot of developers proposing to use PV diverters to heat up water when the PV are not, when the energy produced from the PV is not being utilised. And that's probably a more effective way than actually putting it back into the grid. Wastewater heat recovery is going to become more common from this year, as is solar hot water PV, and we'll also see an increase in the use of battery storage from 2025 onwards. Overheating risk, there'll be some external shading, more external shading from 2030, better glazing specifications from 2021, positioning windows, and again, this is part of the requirements in relation to Part O, so a lot of that is in there. And so increased ventilation rates, etc., is sort of where developers are proposing going forward at the moment with overheating risk. So I just want to give you a bit of background now with NHBC Foundation and what we're doing there. I'm sorry about the image here, I can't get a better image. The one thing we're looking at is how foundations may change with respect to climate change, and how developers will deal with that, and what the risks on foundations. RSK are producing that publication for us, and we've received the first draft of that. So that's one of the publications we're doing. We've also supported CIBC in TM 166, which is a good practice guide for residential heat pumps, and that is because we want to align with the rest of the industry, and that's why we supported that publication. We produced a publication on, this is now out actually, apologies, but we produced the publication in October, and this is to inform builders and developers, especially small to medium builders and developers, what the requirements will be about electric vehicle charging points. Now, as a matter of interest, as it currently stands, there is, at the time of writing, about 188,000 heat pumps, electric vehicle charging points within England and Wales. If you imagine the bringing into regulation the provision of heat pumps, that almost could double it year on year just by the requirements of the building regulations. So, which I think is a good point. Now, excuse the title on this one. We are currently producing a publication to help the industry understand what are the risks with the future home standards, and how to mitigate those risks before they occur. And this is based on actual evidence by different homeowners, housing associations, to say, we get these constant complaints about noisy ventilation systems, or we get constant complaints about a room feeling cold, or etc. So the idea is each page of this publication is almost like a virtuous circle. Is how you in the first instance design it to incorporate that consequence does not occur, and then from there how you build it in, and how you then get good customer satisfaction. And we have that publication, and we hope to launch that just before the future homes, the 2021 implementation in June. Some other publications, we did a publication with the RSPB on biodiversity, so it's not just about the housing structure that we do. That's gone down quite well, and this is to help developers sort of meet planning needs in relation to improving net gain in biodiversity on sites. What's really encouraging, we've got RSPB coming to NHBC next week to tell us how to improve our biodiversity at our offices, which I'm really looking forward to meeting them on that, and it'll be quite an interesting project. We're also looking at supporting a publication with the Trees Design Action Group, and we've agreed to support this. At NHBC, I think there's been a myth that we don't support trees near dwellings. Actually, what we do is ensure that if trees are planted, that the risk against those trees, or such as foundation movement or whatever, is mitigated. So what we want to do is work with TDAG to work on that basis, to ensure that sites can have the required tree canopy that is needed, and we can actually still have resilient buildings against trees. We're also working with DLUC, or we've got an initial meeting with DLUC and the industry to help define the different definitions of carbon and different definitions of energy rating terms And the main reason this is to promote consistency across the industry. So when I always talk about energy efficiency, everyone has the same thoughts about what energy efficiency actually means, or what zero carbon means compared to true zero carbon, or etc., or net zero carbon. So there's clarity on that. So we're doing some work on there, and we've got some meetings in the next couple of weeks on that. And one publication that I didn't mention that we're working on as well is one on ground gases. And the reason why I say that is because we know that insulation thicknesses will increase on ground floors as we go forward. That means that gas membranes, where there are sites with gases present or a risk of gas being present, those membranes will push further into the ground, which may be outside of the scope of existing industry guidance. So with that in mind, we are looking at providing some guidance and some practical solutions about how that's dealt with. And then another publication we're looking at, and the final slide for me today, is we're looking at how machinery can be electrified on sites. So not just electrifying our cars, but making our sites cleaner from a carbon point of view as well. And we're just in an early discussion with JCB and Persimmon on that, and something we want to develop. And that's a very quick whistle-stop tour of the technical update of what we're doing, some of the information that we've gathered from industry, and also about what we're doing with modern methods of construction. And I suppose that is where I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you very much. Very thorough, as always. I know we've got some questions coming in. Should we just have a quick recap on the poll that we did earlier, just to see if the results surprise you, if they're in line with your thinking? So, Abraham, if we could have the results finally up now from the poll. There we go. How many new plots? So 34,000 was the big answer. And does that surprise you?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think we were surprised at the volumes as it came back after lockdown, and that's why I wanted to emphasize that it's come back quite strong. Yeah. Okay.
Question 2, Abraham, if we could, number of registered plots using MMC increase 5% is the view. Does that surprise you?
I think it did surprise us during lockdown, but I do estimate that will continue to increase, because there are a lot of bodies, organisations that are looking at MMC in different ways now. So it will become even more wide scale, I think.
Okay, let's have the next one then. So developers switching to heat pumps.
Yeah, 10%. And I think what's encouraging, that 10% is voluntary. I know that's because you can still use mains gas, and it's probably easy to use mains gas, but there are those developers who are starting to do that, which is good.
Okay. And moving on, please, Abraham. What's your most significant risk? There we go. I expect they're all risks, really, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Yeah. But the most significant one for me is systemic.
Right. Okay. So we've got that right. Okay. Yeah. I think that's the end of the question. Oh no, we got one more about electric vehicle charging. Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry, I used the term UK there, but it's mainly England, Wales. But yeah, it's around that 188,000 or that area. But it's starting to increase significantly. I think it will do going forward. The point I was trying to get there is actually the numbers relatively low, and based on the orders received by NHBC alone, if you imagine, and I'm not necessarily saying that every dwelling will have a charge point because it's communal or whatever, but you'll see that will increase significantly. Okay.
Right. I'm going to go to the questions. Just before I do that, Richard, I've got one or two comments in the chat. Kevin Brocklesby says there are 2 categories to volumetric systems, Cat 1, 3D, and Cat 2, 2D. Alfred Roberts says, can we have the slides after the session? Yes, you can. I think you're doing a PDF version, Richard, for us, which is going up on the Leaders Meets website. David Fleming says, does the NHBC believe the infrastructure, e.g. installers, etc., is in place to facilitate the impending step change to air source heat pumps? Quick answer to that.
Yeah, so honest answer, I don't know. I would say that probably not, but I know the government are doing a fair bit of work with the competent person schemes, etc., to work on that. The benefit to me of a heat pump is that it is an electrical installation. We have electricians, and it involves electric and probably water, which is plumbing, and we have heating engineers and plumbing. The one thing we're taking away is the gas. So I think that actually it can be done. I think the one thing we've got to focus on is not just the quality of the installation of the heat pump, but the overall quality of the building, the fabric, to make sure that the energy demand on the heat pump is low. And I think that's the key aspect, I would say.
Okay. Christopher Hall says, thanks, Richard. Very interesting. So that covers the chat. So let's go to the questions. Now, we haven't got long, Richard, so they're going to have to be short answers. We've got 10 minutes. So you can read that there then. Surely the risks associated in off-site construction could also be found in on-site construction. Is there a gap analysis available on the data gathered by NHBC?
Yeah, so this is the main challenge with MMC, with off-site construction. We don't know the risks necessarily with off-site construction as well, because we haven't got a legacy, a background. As NHBC, we've been providing warranties on traditional and timber frame building since 1936, which gives us a good indication of what goes well and what doesn't, and that's the key thing. So the risk management model that we have from a point of view of inspection is predominantly focused on those risks. So we therefore are almost starting from scratch a little bit with off-site construction.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on, Abraham, to the next question, if we may. Yes, why don't NHBC use recognized quality management systems and make these the industry standard?
Yeah, so we do ask for a quality management system to be in place as part of the assessment process for NHBC accepts. So we require that, and that could be ISO 9001, but we will then check against that quality management process to ensure that it's actually correctly implemented in place. So even though some manufacturers have ISO 9001, we still see some discrepancy in construction quality that we raise as part of our inspection process. But we do require ISO 9001 or equivalent.
As part of your acceptance.
Part of the acceptance process, yeah.
Okay. Next question then, please, Abraham. What additional level of certainty does NHBC accepts offer over and above BBA certification, particularly in relation to a closed panel system?
Well, firstly, there are hardly any BBA certificates for closed panel systems. I think that's the key thing. We work very closely with BBA, but I would say that what we are saying is that we are accepting the system from an NHBC perspective to say that we would issue a warranty. Now with BBA, there may be an acceptance clause on the BBA certificate from NHBC, which we will review, but it's more about embedding that into our inspection regime and processes to ensure that it's more of a seamless process, and that's the additional level. I think it's embedding it into our processes at NHBC.
Okay, I'll have the next question then, please, Abraham, if we may. What about 3D printed?
We're not there yet, I suppose is the answer. But obviously, we do believe that we have a different vision with innovation going forward. But we're not there yet with 3D printed.
Okay, there you go. There's a short, sharp answer for you, Kevin. How do we deal with damage during transportation? Now, there's a curveball for you.
Yeah, so actually what we do is part of that system manual and part of the quality assurance process is we ensure that the transportation element is included in those quality management processes for a start off. And then what we do then is we still do physical inspection on site. So we still have our inspectors on site who will look at those elements such as damage. It could be breather membranes that are ripped, or a cavity sock that's been removed, or whatever. It's simple as that. Or worst case scenario, something's hit a bridge. But we look at that, and we also make sure that as part of the site regime is that we don't see modules or panels stored for an excessive long time unprotected and things like that.
Okay. I think there's another question, Abraham, as I understand it, looking at my Another couple of questions. What's the time frame for the new NHBC MMC standards to be in place?
So we're not proposing. Well, we haven't got an MMC standard to be put in place at the moment. So we're not. We may consider a standard for MMC. We have put more guidance in our standards about how we deal with closed panel systems, where historically we send a letter in writing from NHBC, and sometimes someone gives us a letter going back to 2006 to say that we've got an acceptance from NHBC. So we've changed that to say that acceptance via NHBC accepts, and the key thing for that is so we can maintain and manage the acceptances that we have. We haven't yet put in a we haven't proposed yet a standard, but we're looking at a section within our standards about different wall types.
Okay. And we've put the slido.com reference up again because some of the questions are coming in on chat.
Yeah.
If you could put them in the Slido, it makes it easier for us to put it up on the screen. And also there's a reference there to a feedback survey, which I'll go through later. Abraham, could we have the next question up, please? So if you've got any questions, rather than put them in the chat box, can you put them on slido.com, please? Then we could bring them up on the screen. I think we've got one more question in the system, Abraham, from what I can gather. Or is that it?
No, that's it.
That's it. Okay. All right. Okay. Right. I've just been told the Q&A section is closed. Is that right, Abraham? Have we closed the Q&A section?
No, it's still open.
It's still open. That's what I thought. Let me just have a look at the chat box to see what we've got that I've missed. Let me see. Does the NHBC believe the infrastructure? We've done that one. It's my understanding a lot of gas engineers are being retrained on electric. No surprises there.
No, that's true.
If an NHBC customer developer chooses to use an initially rejected NHBC Assure MMC producer, will NHBC assist in uplifting the MMC producer or reject cover?
So NHBC accept is one method of demonstrating to NHBC that a product is suitable. We've got a requirement R3, which is about material conformity, if you like, that also accepts third-party certifications such as BBA, Kiwa, Wintec, etc. So NHBC accept is not the only route, but if we've got a product that hasn't got, or if we've got a system that hasn't got third-party certification nor NHBC accepts, it's unlikely we would accept.
Okay. Another one from Kevin. He's been very busy today. Would it be possible for NHBC to issue a list of acceptance criteria? Yeah,
I think if you go onto our website, NHBC accepts, that is there. So we've got a list of the accepted products and also talks through the process.
Right. Okay. I think I've covered all the questions, Richard. So thank you very much for your time and your experience and your knowledge, which you've passed on in the last hour. Now then, Abraham, that's it. If we've got the slide up again. So ladies and gents in the audience, if you want to receive a certificate of attendance for CPD, please go to mypropass.co.uk and there's the link. So ZBXJ-7690. If you type that in as your reference, you will automatically get your CPD certificate for today. Just leaves me now to, first of all, promote what we're doing next Friday, which is a presentation from Western College, and it's talking about the CITB Constructing Lives Together project. So that will be interesting because future skills is certainly something we're all talking about as we struggle. If it's not too difficult to say, as we struggle to find the necessary skills throughout the supply chain. So that'll be an interesting webinar next Friday at 12 o'clock as always. So that's one. We've also got an additional one. I don't know whether we've got it on the screen, Abraham, probably not. Oh, we have. Excellent. You're thinking ahead of me. An additional one on Monday week. We're very lucky that Professor David Mosey is going to be talking about the gold standard, which was launched about a week ago. So we had to fit it in around his busy diary. He couldn't make a Friday, so we've booked him for Monday week, the 24th. So two important webinars coming up on skills next Friday, and then Monday week on the gold standard. Richard, thank you once again for your time, your efforts, your knowledge. Can I thank everyone at Leaders Meets, to Howard and to Abraham, for once again hosting us so well. And thank you to you, ladies and gentlemen, for making this first webinar of 2022 so interactive. I wish you well for the rest of the day. I hope you have a good weekend, and I look forward to seeing you all again this time next Friday. Thanks very much. Bye-bye now.